Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Netcapital team. Let's allow one moment for everyone to settle in. Thanks. It's coming in by the busload. Okay, looks like we hit a critical mass, so we'll go ahead and dive right in. Welcome again. Today, I'm excited to welcome Bill Crossman with Phoenix PharmaLabs. As always, this company is actively raising on the Netcapital platform. I just added a link to that in the chat, or you can go to netcapital.com and search Phoenix, or go to netcapital.com/companies/Phoenix, where you can learn more. There's Q&A there as well, and of course, you can invest. A few housekeeping items. Please do use the Q&A functionality built into Zoom. We want to keep this as interactive as possible. You know, the real value of these opportunities is to ask your questions, not mine. So please do use the Q&A functionality. And I know that there is chat feature built into chat as well, but please do use Q&A. Q&A makes it a lot easier to track the questions and make sure that we can get to as many of them as possible. So with all that being said, please join me in welcoming Bill. Come on onto the stage, Bill, and tell us a little bit about Phoenix PharmaLabs.
Thank you, Eric. So my name is Bill Crossman. I'm CEO of Phoenix PharmaLabs, which is a preclinical drug discovery company that is focused on developing potent, safe, non-addicting painkillers that also show promising potential for opioid as well as cocaine addiction therapy. Our lead drugs are very potent analgesics, at least 10 times more potent than morphine in relieving pain. They are non-addicting, do not produce physical dependence or withdrawal, and do not cause death from overdose at elevated doses.
Thank you so much for that, Bill. And if we could dive kind of right in and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved, and some about your team as well.
Yeah, well, I've spent most of my career working as CEO or CFO of companies ranging from multi-billion-dollar corporations to startups. I've launched early stage technology companies in industries ranging from industrial technologies to software to nanotechnology and life sciences. Dr. John Lawson is our founder of the company and the developer of our intellectual property. Dr. Larry Toll, our chief neuropharmacologist, is leading the advancement of our compounds through preclinical and clinical trials. And we rely on a talented group of domain experts who provide specific expertise in areas such as manufacturing scale-up, formulation, and preclinical oversight, clinical trial planning, toxicology, regulatory affairs, etc.
Great. Thank you so much. Strong scientific background on that team. And big picture, can you tell us, like, so what is the problem that you're trying to solve at Phoenix?
Well, opioids are the most widely prescribed drugs for treatment of moderate to severe pain. However, they are plagued by serious side effects, including euphoria, which leads to abuse and addiction, withdrawal, constipation, and death from overdose. Millions of Americans are addicted to opioids, and most of them, approximately 80%, initially became addicted after taking prescription opioids. So I understand this problem well because my stepson is addicted to opioids, and he initially became addicted after he had been prescribed opioids for treatment of severe pain following an injury. Now he has been addicted for almost 20 years. And trust me, it is an absolutely devastating addiction. We are now witnessing a horrendous death toll from the COVID pandemic, but opioid-related death is a serious problem as well. About 50,000 Americans die every year from opioid overdose, and there's no vaccine against that.
Excuse me. That's a critically important problem that you're solving. And tell me about your solution. What makes it unique and successful?
Well, all of the leading opioids in the market today, like morphine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, methadone, fentanyl, etc., as well as heroin, bind to the mu receptor in the brain and then aggressively stimulate that receptor. So mu is great at producing pain relief, but it also produces euphoria, which leads to abuse and addiction. So our compound, PPL-103, is unique because it binds to 3 receptors, mu, kappa, and delta, and then just partially stimulates those receptors in a much more balanced manner. That partial stimulation derives analgesic benefit from all 3 receptors, but is not sufficiently strong to produce the serious side effects associated with any of the receptors. The reason that all of those other opioids are addicting is because they produce a euphoric high. Without that euphoria, drugs would not be abused and would not be addicting.
Critically important. And before we go into the competition, since we're talking about problem and solution, I want to welcome in some of the questions that are coming in through Q&A. With regards to the patents, what does your IP portfolio look like? How many patents and what type of protection do you have on your drugs?
So we, on our lead drug, PPL-103, we have a composition of matter patent, methods of synthesis and use, including use for addiction therapy. And that is patented in the US and all of the major European countries and Japan, China, Australia, Israel, all of the major countries in the world. And then I was just going to speak about our competition because we actually acquired one of our competition. And the compounds that we acquired are, we acquired 25 compounds, and they are likewise patented in the US and all of the major countries in Europe.
Perfect. Yeah, that does segue great. Can you tell us about what the rest of the competitive landscape looks like, and kind of how you differentiate yourself within the market?
So we recently conducted a thorough review of our competition for a potent, safe, non-addicting analgesic for effective treatment of moderate to severe pain. So moderate to severe pain is a key element. So there's many analgesics on the market and in development that are effective for treating mild to moderate pain, but no drugs are as effective as opioids for treating moderate to severe pain. So besides PPL-103, the only analgesics that appear to provide potent, safe, non-addicting relief for moderate to severe pain are 2 partial nociceptin mu compounds. And we just acquired one of them from the University of Bath in England that we now call PPL-103, we call PPL-138. So in a series of studies conducted at Wake Forest University in non-human primates, this drug has demonstrated that it has very high analgesic potency, more than 100 times the potency of morphine, long duration of action, more than 24 hours, thus making it a very promising treatment for chronic pain, no euphoria, and therefore no abuse and addiction, like PPL-103, no physical dependence or withdrawal, no respiratory depression whatsoever, and so therefore it should be very, very safe, and no tolerance after 4 weeks of chronic administration. So that provides Phoenix with a broad intellectual property platform, as I just described, at least 2 very promising lead drugs in development using different approaches, expanded grant opportunities, and flexibility to develop different products for different markets that have different pricing parameters, such as acute pain, chronic pain, addiction therapy, etc.
Absolutely. And how big is the market for your product?
The prescription opioid market is approximately $30 billion and growing. And the introduction of a safe, non-addictive opioid, such as ours, may increase the willingness of physicians to prescribe the drug, thus further increasing the prescription sales. The total pain market is over $100 billion.
No, that's great. And I appreciate all the Q&A coming in, as well as some of the things coming in through chat. But we're going to continue along this line for a moment before we circle on to the more specific questions. So do hang in there just a moment longer. Can you tell us, Bill, can you tell us a little bit more about your business model and how Phoenix PharmaLabs makes money?
So the strategic objective of our company is to partner with one or more appropriate market leaders that have the resources to maximize the potential of our compounds. So typical deal terms include upfront and milestone payments in the hundreds of millions of dollars, followed by royalties in the 12 to 20% range. Once we have licensed the first compound, we will likely do an IPO so that shareholders can exit at a price that reflects the future stream of cash flows. We will pay out substantial dividends, but we use a portion of the funds raised from the first license to advance additional compounds for other indications, including chronic pain, addiction therapy, and companion animal pain, which will all provide additional license opportunities.
Great. And someone asked me to tell you that the summary is most informative and compelling. Great job. So I just wanted to relay that to you. We'll continue along here. So what is and this is actually some of the questions that are coming in through Q&A as well. What does the progress so far look like? And what do you believe are your next major milestones?
So we've had discussions and due diligence with most of the leading pharma companies that have a strategic focus on pain or addiction therapy. Most of them have said that they would be interested in doing a deal after we have entered phase 1 human clinical trials, which we expect to do this year. So we've been advancing it through preclinical studies, and we expect to go into human clinical trials this year. However, our plan is to continue to advance PPL-103 and 138 through phase 1 to proof of concept in humans in order to position the compounds for optimal deal terms through either a license or acquisition in about 3 years.
Great. And that kind of ties into, what do you view as your kind of potential exits for the investors on this call?
So we expect that the exit will be either an acquisition of the company or one or more license agreements, which, like I said, we will then probably do an IPO so that people can exit with the value of the future stream of cash flows from licenses, et cetera. And we will dividend out most of the proceeds, but continuing to use some of the proceeds to continue to advance our other compounds. And we expect to do at least our first license within about 3 years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Bill. We're going to start diving into some of these very thoughtful questions that are coming in. And we actually had a couple emails come in beforehand, so we'll start there. Your Netcapital offering page listed AT121 from Astray Therapeutics as the only other product that's competitive with PPL-103 and PPL-138. Is that still the case today? And can you describe the advantages you think your products have over AT121?
Yes, that is still the case today. And so AT121 is quite similar to our PPL-138. So it is a mu-nociceptin compound. And our chief neuropharmacologist, Larry Toll, is one of the leaders in that field. And he actually worked with the CEO of Australia in researching a lot of these compounds. So a ton of these nociceptin mu compounds and nociceptin capta, et cetera, were developed, but most of them don't perform as well as these. So there's only 2 that really perform like 103, and that's PPL-138 and AT121.
Great. And continuing along, the offering indicates the funding raised in this round will be used for preparation for phase 1 trials. Do you anticipate doing another funding round to advance the product further, or do you anticipate a license deal or other strategy for that?
Yeah, we expect to raise additional funds through additional investment rounds as we move forward. So as we move into phase 2, we'll have to raise additional funds. we anticipate that at least a portion of this will come from grant funding. So we've been successful thus far in raising grant funding from the U.S. Army Medical Research and Material Command, as well as the NIH and the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And we see some grant opportunities in the near future that look like they could be good opportunities for us, and we will be applying for those. So we expect to fund this with a combination of grants and investment capital.
Perfect, perfect. And last email question. In an earlier video interview with Netcapital, you mentioned a pre-IPO acquisition by a larger company as one of the possible exit strategies. Could you give us a sense for the kind of multiples that are typical for that type of a deal?
Well, I can express it more easily in terms of license deals because those are more common. There's more data on license deals out there than there are acquisitions, but an acquisition would be similar to license deals, except that the money would be more upfront as opposed to spread out over a period of time. So a typical license deal would have upfront fees and milestone payments in hundreds of millions of dollars. I would expect an acquisition to be more than that because typically an acquisition would not include royalties. Although if I were negotiating an acquisition deal, I would push very strongly for royalties, just as we would have in a license deal, because we believe strongly in the future potential for these drugs, and we would want a piece of those revenues.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. We're going to kind of bounce around a little bit because I can't see a real consistent theme in a lot of these questions. But if we feel like we've answered some of these already, we might not bring them back up. But just kind of diving in, since this is just so critically important to the products that you offer through Phoenix PharmaLabs, are there any side effects with using these drugs, either of them?
Yeah, so with PPL-103, there is some respiratory depression at analgesic dose, but unlike a lot of the opioids in the market, the respiratory depression appears to plateau as the dosage is increased, rather than increasing very rapidly as it does with oxycodone and some of the other opioids. Also, PPL-103 produces mild sedation, so kind of drowsiness at analgesic dose. So the way they rate it is on a scale, and it's rated 1 or 2, which means that in this case, the monkeys noticed movement in the room, but they appeared to be a little drowsy, or they noticed sounds in the room. But as the dose increases above the analgesic dose, and there shouldn't be any reason for people to take more than the analgesic dose because they're not going to get high from it like they do from other opioids. But if they were, then it would become increasingly sedative and put people to sleep. So in the case of 138, we have witnessed no side effects whatsoever. So there's no respiratory depression whatsoever, which means the therapeutic window between the analgesic dose and the dose that would make you feel ill is huge. It's so far we haven't found any right-hand edge to that window, and there's no sedation, no other side effects that we have encountered, and we've done quite a few studies.
Very impressive. And is an investment at this time just for the drug, one of the drugs, both of the drugs, or for the company in general, including future products?
For the company in general, so that would include both of the drugs that are lead drugs that I just described. Some of the other drugs that we have patented look promising for treatment of opioid addiction, cocaine addiction, and even methamphetamine addiction. And then we may advance one of them for animal health. So since these drugs would not be scheduled because they're not addicting, or they'd be at a low schedule, low enough so that veterinarians could prescribe pain medications for companion animals for dog, or at least for dogs. I don't know about cats because cats are different, but that people could take home and give to their pets, and there's nothing available now for severe pain in animals that people can take home. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Getting into kind of, there's a couple questions on progress. I feel like we answered those, but I want to make sure that everybody feels like they got exactly all the information they need to be able to go and invest. So the questions are, so one of the people saying, I've invested from the very start, very excited to see the progression. If this drug is proven safe in all the trials and tests, what do you think is taking so long for the approval? Is it outside investment, accelerated approvals, et cetera? And that ties into a couple other questions as well.
So things have been slowed down a bit by COVID. Yeah. So we had studies going on at Wake Forest University, for example, and Wake Forest, like most of the universities, was shut down. And so research on that stopped. Now the research there has started again. There's things like approvals that we need from the government, and the government is slow at granting these approvals because they aren't staffed as effectively as they were before COVID. So it has slowed things down, and we're hoping that as soon as the COVID situation improves, that things will speed up. We're still making progress, and we're still doing studies. We're doing studies in ITR Canada, at Wake Forest University, at various places. And so it's progressing. And like I said, we expect to be in phase 1 human clinical trials this year, which we plan to conduct in Australia, because there are some advantages to doing that there. But all of the studies that are conducted in Australia will meet FDA standards for approval in the US.
Got it, got it. And then when and how are the FDA approvals going when and how are they going to happen? I think it's a timeline speculation kind of thing going on in this follow-up question.
Yeah, so the first approval is what they call IND, Introductory New Drug Approval, which we need before we go into phase 1 in humans. That we expect to occur this year. Then it will take us about 1 year to go through phase 1 safety studies in humans. And then there's approval to go into phase 2, and then we'll enter phase 2 and expect to get to proof of concept in phase 2 in about another year. So like in probably 2023 or so.
Perfect. I think that answered another question here, talking about the phase 2A proof of concept taking 3 years, and what does that process look like? So I think we kind of
phase 2 is efficacy, right? So phase 1 is safety, phase 2 is efficacy.
Perfect. Going into return on investment. So how would an investor see an ROI with a license royalty agreement?
Well, as soon as we license even one of the compounds for just one indication, there will be substantial cash flows from that. There are upfront fees and milestone payments, like I mentioned. Typically, we would expect in the hundreds of millions of dollars, particularly for drugs that is as promising as this. It would be well into the hundreds of millions, we expect. And so most of that would be dividended out immediately to shareholders. We would withhold some of it to fund the advancement of some of the other compounds, particularly our second lead compound. We would want to get both of those licensed. And then we would also, as I said, we want to do an IPO so that people could exit the company, sell their stock in the company, and the price of the stock should reflect the future stream of cash flows that would come from royalties, et cetera.
Perfect. And that kind of follows into, there are a couple of questions about the offering itself and what types of securities. I'm going to direct the questions about the value and the price per share directly to the offering page. I'll add a link to that, but this is an interesting question. I'm an investor in the first offering and plan to add on to it in this one. Are we buying the same class of shares that you own?
Yes. Question. Yeah. So it's all common stock. That's what I own. That's what the rest of the management team owns.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. And I'm actually going to, sorry about that, not answer that one live. Is this medication an extended release or instant release? And if it's extended release, what is the half-life compared to a drug such as methadone? Yep, I said that right. In say a 10 milligram dosage. Is there a guesstimate on the time frame? We won't hold you to the specifics.
So yeah, so PPL 103 is active for about 8 hours, and 138 is active for about 24 hours, which is very long for an API. So the API is the active pharmaceutical ingredient alone without any formulation. So 138 is very long lasting, even just as the molecule itself. But you know, with a lot of drugs, you change things with formulation. So extended release is a formulation that extends the period of time that releases the drug in the gut. You might have a formulation that makes the drug more bioavailable by either providing like an enteric-coated capsule that it goes directly to the small intestines and bypasses the stomach, or maybe a sublingual or something like that. So there's a lot of science that goes into the formulations that are then built around the active pharmaceutical ingredient.
Great. Oh, no, this is an interesting question, and we'll be delicate about this, but are you seeing any resistance from the pharmaceutical companies, being that addictive properties can have a benefit to them?
Yeah, well, we've been approached by particularly one big pharma company that I think would like to see us disappear quietly into the night. And they're one of the companies that you read about in the papers that have been involved in promoting these addictive drugs. So yeah. I don't want to be specific about.
I agree. Yep. I think that was a perfectly right answer. Yep. And then, sorry, let me make sure I can keep the party going here. Actually, we're coming up on right around the halfway mark. So this would be a good time to remind everyone that I did add a link to the offering. So you can go directly to netcapital.com and search Phoenix, or click the link that I added to chat, or go to netcapital.com/companies/Phoenix, and you can learn a whole bunch more information. And of course, that is where you can go to invest directly in this company. So I wanted to make sure that I reminded our attendees. And thank you so much for the engagement. This has been very interactive, and that definitely is the goal. So that was the question that we just had there. What provisions have been made to not dilute early stage investors? I guess some anti-dilution conversations here. And I actually kind of want to save that and direct you to the offering page, specific terms about the investment opportunity. The best way to find more information about that is through the Netcapital offering page. So I appreciate that question, but I am going to have to direct you directly to the offering page. Excuse me. And have you reached out to non-US pharma companies?
I would say in response to that, like, everyone's shares are the same as mine, so if there's dilution, it affects all of us the same.
No, I do appreciate that, actually. And have you reached out to non-US pharmaceutical companies for approval in their markets? I would think their FDA equivalent approval path would be quicker and easier than the US.
Some of them are somewhat easier. And we have spoken to leading pharma companies, a number of leading pharma companies in Europe, leading pharma companies in Japan, China, various countries around the world. We've had the same kind of positive response from all of them. We've also spoken to pharma companies that specialize in animal health. So it will come a little bit after we get into humans, but there's a number of companies that have expressed interest in licensing the compounds for treatment of pain in animals. Also, since our drugs are not constipating like opioids are, they've indicated that they have potential for treating horses and animals that have delicate digestion systems like that. Yeah, and we get approached periodically by various pharma companies around the world.
And some really cool, interesting, like specialized questions here. I know we already discussed the estimated time to go to market, but if you want to kind of high level touch on that one more time, what is estimated time to go to market for this drug, assuming that all goes well? And then she said, I assume you are not eligible for orphan drug or any other special designation for these compounds.
Yeah, so we once we're in human trials, we do expect that we will get a fast track approval by the FDA. So then, as I said, we expect to be in phase 2 trials in a couple of years, and we would expect the drugs to be in the market in about 5 years. It does take a while, but we would expect fast track approval, so it might be quicker than that.
Yeah, and then any reference to the orphan drug component? I'm not very
the
familiar.
orphan drug component. Yeah, so we've been approached by companies that specialize in orphan drugs, and there is a potential to advance our compounds for certain orphan diseases. We haven't put our time, money, and effort into that at this point, but it's something that we might keep in mind.
Fantastic, fantastic. Wow, moving right along. You guys are so interactive. This is phenomenal. You hanging in there, Bill? You're doing great. You state that PPL-103 can be used for cocaine addiction. How is cocaine abuse related to pain? Is there a blocking mechanism in the brain that's similar? Really interesting, good question there.
Yeah, that probably needs to go to our neuropharmacologist instead of to me. But I can tell you the reason that we believe that it is effective for treating cocaine addiction is because we had a collaboration with one of the leading scientists in the world on addiction therapy, and that person indicated that because of the fact that our PPL-103 agonizes the kappa receptor, she thought that it would be effective in blocking cocaine addiction. So then we proceeded to do studies of cocaine addiction therapy in animals. So it's demonstrated in rodents that rodents that have become addicted to cocaine, it will block relapse. So rodents that have become addicted and then they've essentially gone into rehab, whatever, and then normally they would relapse very quickly and start taking cocaine again. It's been demonstrated that our drug blocks that relapse into cocaine and also into methamphetamine. And the same proved true with PPL-138.
Fascinating. That is fascinating. Okay, I think this is more of a comment, but I think it's interesting, so I'm gonna share it. If you need test subjects for human trials, I will gladly volunteer. This is not me speaking. This is an attendee. She deals with high pain issues. She's taking methadone and oxycodone, I believe, and walks with 2 canes, which could have some long-term issues. So I just wanted to share that you have a supporter in the audience today.
I would love to get the drug out to people like that, and when we get into human clinical trials, it'll be possible for people to sign up. I would sign up myself. I have back pain and so on, but I will, as the CEO of the company, I would probably be prohibited from participating in the trials.
Oh man, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that on both sides. And then, so good question here. Has COVID impacted your progress over the last year?
Yeah, like I say, it slowed down our progress somewhat because some universities have been shut down, and because the government is slower in responding. Like we have a lot of regulations that we have to follow in humane treatment of animals, and that requires continuous government approvals, and those approvals are slower than normal because of COVID and things like that, you know.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
no, that
hopefully
makes sense.
you know,
Sorry, what was that?
hopefully the things will start moving more quickly now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And can you tell us why Bath University selected Phoenix PharmaLabs to license the PL 138 instead of license any other company, instead of licensing from any other companies in the space?
Yeah, well, actually, that drug, which Bath called BU 10038, had been licensed by Bath to a pharma company, Orexigen. And Orexigen was advancing it through preclinical studies. And then Orexigen was a company that had the weight loss medication, and they had invested a lot of money in it, went into debt. I don't know all the details, but in any event, that company ended up going bankrupt. And as a result of the bankruptcy, the rights to that drug, and actually all of those 25 nociceptin drugs, the rights reverted to the University of Bath. And our chief neuropharmacologist, Larry Told, had a close relationship with the scientists at Bath. It's kind of a close-knit group of people that are neuropharmacologists that are expert in this area. And so Bath was looking for a home for it. And actually, in that case, COVID probably was a benefit, because at that point, COVID hit, and you could see that Bath felt that it was going to be difficult for them to find a home for the drug very quickly, somebody that could advance the drug effectively, and so on. And since they knew us, knew our background, trusted Larry Toll, et cetera, they decided to license it to us.
Very, very good story. Thanks for that. And more on the actual administration of the drug. How is the drug administered? And do you have an idea of what the reimbursement would look like? I guess it's talking about 103 and 138, if there's a differentiation there.
Yeah. So right now, during the animal studies, they're being administered by IV. We need to be able to administer in a way that is consistent across the board. So that's how they're being administered now. But right now we have a pre-formulation work that is going on at a laboratory that is studying the bioavailability through different routes of administration. So PPL-103, for example, is not very bioavailable as an oral dosage as it is right now as an active pharmaceutical ingredient, but in a formulation, it could be made effective orally. So we're studying things like interduodenal, where they provide the drug down through the stomach to the small intestines. So you could then develop an enteric coating for the formulation that would make it effective as an oral administration. We're also studying sublingual administration. So PPL-138 has already demonstrated that it has very good bioavailability through sublingual administration. So, and that's just as the molecule itself without any formulation. So that looks very promising for that route, if not, and possibly oral as well. And there's other routes that we're studying, like intranasal, transdermal, et cetera, but various different formulation possibilities for administering in these different routes.
No, that was really, really important. I'm glad that was asked. Thanks for sharing that. And continuing along towards kind of the back end, the last couple moments here. So please do continue to ask questions. We're going to get to as many of them as possible. But somebody was asking for a follow-up on the medication length of time. I think it was regards to how long to stay in your system and how often can you take it. Can you share a little bit more about that?
About 8 hours for 103 and over 24 hours for 138. And then as soon as it has cleared your system after that period of time, if you're still in pain, then you can take another dose. And you know, and with these drugs, you don't have to be afraid of becoming addicted after you take multiple doses, where you do with, you know, the other opioids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a good question for a global perspective. Are addictive opioids a problem around the world, or mainly just in the US? Really good question.
Yeah, very good question. So they are a problem around the world. It's a huge problem in the US. It varies from country to country because of the way that different governments treat opioids. So for example, in China, you can't get opioids. I mean, if you're in severe pain, you can't get a powerful analgesic to treat the severe pain unless you are very well connected and very wealthy. And then you can apply to the police department to obtain opioids through the police department. But a very, very small percentage of the population qualifies to be able to get opioids through the police department. And consequently, there's a lot of people in China that are in extreme pain with no effective means of relieving that pain. So it's a double-sided coin. You have places where there's a lot of addiction because it's allowed, and you have places where there's not much addiction, but there's a tremendous amount of pain because it's not allowed.
Wow. No, that's heartbreaking. Thanks for sharing that.
But China would be a good market for our drugs. Because
no, it sounds like it. Sounds like it. And can an addict file for the right to try right now, since addictive drugs could be a death sentence for them?
You mean in our trials, I take it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the trials that we will, in phase 1 trials, no, because those are safety studies, so that they have to be in healthy subjects who have not been addicted. But after we get into phase 2, we will actually want to do human abuse liability studies. And for those studies, we will want to have people that are not necessarily addicted, but have at least experienced the euphoria of opioids and been attracted to that euphoria, so they know what it feels like. And so then they'll be able to distinguish between the euphoric opioids and our drugs. So later on in phase 2.
Good to know. Good to know. And then do you view CBD as a competitor for pain relief, or is that only useful for less serious pain? Good question.
It's really for less serious pain. So it's very effective for treating mild to moderate pain. Some people you know, feel pain relief in severe pain, but in the trials that have been conducted, both animal and human trials, they have not been as effective as opioids in treating moderate to severe pain.
Great, thank you for that. Going over to some kind of investment specific questions, and you know, I'm not exactly trying to answer this, but do you believe that, so dollars invested a year ago have the same value as dollars invested today if they add to it in this investment round? I guess it's kind of with the investment mechanics.
Yeah, so we did a previous round of Netcapital about a year and a half ago. And the price at that time was 81 cents a share. Now the shares are being priced at $1 a share. That increased valuation is justified by the advancement of 103 and also by the acquisition of 138. And actually, as you know, Netcapital has the ability to trade in the secondary market on any company's shares in Netcapital. And so after the last offering was offered at 81 cents, it traded up to as high as $5 a share. The average price over the last year and a half has been around $1.60, $1.70 a share, something like that. So we feel $1 a share is a pretty fair price.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that feedback there, Bill. and that is an important piece of the Netcapital platform. Do check it out. And so last couple of questions here, and I always like to allow a little bit of time at the end for the executives to share kind of closing remarks. I'm old school like that. So I do want to make sure that we get through these questions as they're coming in, but we're going to allocate at last a little bit for closing remarks from Bill. So does Phoenix have to determine the administration method as part of the clinical trials? And then, or does Big Pharma come in at that point? I'm not sure that I 100% understand what's going on, but Bill, can you?
So the route of administration, so we would probably enter phase 1 trials. For 103, we'd probably enter trials as an IV administration, but then it's actually easier to shift from that route of administration to a different route of administration after you're already in phase 1, which we would probably do with 103. We may advance 138 as a sublingual application from the get-go, or we may do the same thing as 103, doing an IV first and then moving to an oral or sublingual during phase 1.
Perfect. And somebody wants to kind of continue on the conversation about expanding into China, since that seems like it could be a pretty lucrative market. Are there any intellectual property protections that you think you could build in to protect 103 and 138 in China?
Well, we have a patent in China for 103. We do not have a patent for 138. So we would be much more cautious about moving into China for 138. However, I mean, I've spent a lot of time doing business in China. I created some of the earliest joint ventures in China. So I'm very aware of the intellectual property risks in China. Actually, some of the best protection in China, I believe, is through contractual terms. So we wouldn't even speak to any company in China without a non-disclosure agreement, a confidentiality agreement that would protect us from use or disclosure by that company. And a very effective form of protection in China is to partner with somebody who has a vested interest the same as yours. So, and you know, our drug produced in China couldn't be sold in other areas of the world where we have patents. So the market would be restricted to China, and within China, it would depend upon having a good contractual relationship with a strong Chinese partner. I've found in my experience that is essential.
Yeah, that's critically important. Thanks for sharing about that. People are saying this all sounds very good. Thanks for letting us come along for the ride. Please keep up the good work. Please hurry. People are excited. So 2 more questions. I'm gonna try to squeeze them both in before we move into closing remarks here. Do you plan to outsource your clinical trials down the line?
Well, we're outsourcing them now. I mean, we don't do any of the preclinical or clinical work internally. I mean, that only big pharma companies can do that, you know. And so, but we subcontract to laboratories. Like I said, we contract out our manufacturing for 103 to a company in Canada. For 138, it's manufactured in the Netherlands. We are doing clinical trials in Quebec on 103, and Wake Forest University in North Carolina, and same with 138. So we select good, well-qualified CROs wherever they're located in the world to do quality trials. And then we have a team of consultants that work very closely with us that have, as I think I described, deep levels of expertise in the clinical trial process. And so they oversee all of those trials with us. And we have regulatory consultants. And it takes, to do this, it takes an army of consultants. Yeah, so.
Love it. Yep. It takes a whole village to get anything done around here. more thank yous for the opportunity to invest are coming in, but I'm going to have to burn right past that. How long is the term of your license for PL 138?
It's exclusive license forever, and for as long as the life of the patent, which the patent will go to, I think, 2034, and then you can get extensions from the FDA for another 4 or 5 years. So say till 2038 or so. There's also other strategies that can be used to extend it beyond that. So 2038 or beyond.
Perfect timing, everyone. We got through all of our questions with just a little bit of time left. Bill, as I mentioned, actually, before I do this, of course, friendly reminder, you can go directly to netcapital.com. You can learn a little bit more. There's also a Q&A session there. And you can, of course, you can invest. You can join the family and grow with this company as they continue to do what is clearly important work, and that Bill is very passionate about. So the link is in the chat, netcapital.com, search Phoenix, or netcapital.com/companies/Phoenix. Got past all of the administrative stuff. Bill, tell us, why is now the time to go directly to that link and invest in Phoenix PharmaLabs and grow with your team?
Well, I would just say that I believe strongly in these drugs. I'm one of the largest investors in the company, and I have had personal experience with opioid addiction in my family, and actually most of the board members, the management team, many of the shareholders in the company have had experience with opioid addiction in their families, and so all of us are strong believers in these compounds, and we believe it'll make a difference in the world. In an area that we've seen, where we've seen people's lives turn into a living hell because of their addictions.
Yeah, this is clearly very personal to you, and I love how invested you are in this. There was questions coming in at the very end. Yes, as always, this has been recorded. I just added the link to the Netcapital YouTube channel in the chat, but you can go to YouTube and search Netcapital. It's under the name Netcapital Team, and this will be uploaded in the next couple of moments here. So yes, please do check that out if you missed anything earlier in the conversation, and also feel free to share liberally. Thank you so much for all the participants and attendees. It was well subscribed. The Q&A was incredibly engaging, so I appreciate that. The speaker version. Okay, Judy, I will make sure to follow up with you on this. Let me just grab your info. Yes, there will be. This has been recorded and it is on the Netcapital YouTube account. I wanted to thank everybody who came in. Fantastic questions and answers, but most importantly, Bill, I wanted to thank you and the rest of the Phoenix. I know there's a whole army of people behind you, as you said, a huge village working towards this. So thank you for you and the entire Phoenix Pharma Labs team. We're excited to be a very small part of your journey here in solving what is clearly a critical problem. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of your questions, everyone.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you to all of the participants. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye now.
Take care.